Hola, clase. Today we are going to start talking about how to give people commands in Spanish so that we can tell them what we want them to do or not do. I have two things to tell you before we get started. First, commands in Spanish are more difficult than commands in English. That's just the truth. So I want to be honest with you up front and tell you that you're really going to have to pay attention and work hard during this chapter and the next chapter to learn how to give commands in Spanish. Because what we learn in these two chapters, they're just going to be scratching the surface of using commands in Spanish. And you really will want to get your head around these concepts in order to move forward. The second thing that I want to tell you is that learning commands in Spanish is extremely practical. You will use commands in Spanish in the real world a lot, maybe more so than some of the other things that we have learned in Spanish. And so while it might be difficult to learn commands in Spanish, it will be well worth your time if you pay attention and focus and take notes and listen and work hard. All right, so let's get right down to what makes commands in Spanish harder than commands in English. And here's what it all centers on. In English, we only have one you. So when I want to give a command to someone and say, you do this, or you don't do this, I only have one you in English. And so I can give everyone around me the same command. I can tell my pastor, hey, can you close the door? Close the door. I can tell a kid, hey, can you close the door? Close the door. I use the exact same verb for every single person that I want to talk to and say, you do this. The difference or the problem is that in Spanish, you'll remember that we have 4 different yous that we can pick from. So we can use vosotros, we can use usted. If it's one person, we can use ustedes. If it's a group of people, we can use tú if we're treating someone informally, like maybe a close friend. So we have to have a command for each one of those different people. And our verb actually changes to match each one of those people, that you that we're talking to. So today we're going to start with the first you in Spanish, which is usted. And remember that this you means you as in one person and you as in a person that we treat a little bit formally or respectfully. All right. So we're going to learn how to give commands to people who we use the pronoun usted with. All right, so that's why we call them usted commands. Now, on the right-hand side here, you'll see some pictures of my students from Honduras. And the reason why I put these pictures up here is because generally when I'm giving instructions or commands in the classroom and I'm talking to one of my students, I usually use usted command. So if I want to say you do this or you do that or hey, you don't do this, I usually use usted commands, all right? Now, yes, my students are younger than me. I could use two commands. I could use informal commands with them. But generally speaking, a lot of times it's more polite or just formal just to use usted commands around the classroom. And so that's at least what I do most of the time. All right, so here's some of the examples of different types of commands that I might use in the classroom with my students. And you might have even heard me using these commands with you, and you might have thought, why did he conjugate these verbs like this? Well, now maybe you'll see why and get a chance to learn. So for example, por favor, escúcheme, Roberto. Please listen to me, Robert. Sadly, I had to use this command a lot with Robert because he liked to talk a lot, like all the time. Lávese las manos, Breezy. Wash your hands, Breezy. Grecia, abra su computadora. Grecia, open your computer. Haga su tarea, Lizzie. Do your homework. Beba más agua. Drink more water. Noun. Hable más alto, por favor, Nicole. Talk a little bit louder, please. Nicole talked really quietly, so I had to ask her to talk more loudly a lot of times. Luis, escriba su nombre. Luis, write your name. All right, so these are different examples of commands. And if you look at the verbs, they're like escúcheme, lávese, escriba, abra, haga, beba, hable. You'll notice that those verbs are conjugated differently than you've ever seen verbs conjugated before, all right? So they don't look like the present tense, they don't look like the preterite or the imperfect tense. Some of those tenses that we've learned so far, they're different, right? So let me show you how to conjugate verbs so that they will be usted commands. All right, so before I can actually show you how to conjugate our verbs into usted commands, I first need to review with you our present tense conjugations. All right, so here I have the conjugations for hablar, comer, vivir, our AR, ER, and IR verbs. And I just want to point something out to you, all right? Notice that our AR verbs like hablar usually have A endings like as, a, amos, an. Their endings start with an A. Our verbs like comer and vivir, on the other hand, usually have endings that start with E. So es, a, hemos, en, es, a, en. All right. And then specifically, if you look at this line, since we're talking about usted commands, go ahead and look at this line right here. All right. So for our AR, ER, IR verbs, usually would have habla, come, vive. All right. So just remember this, flip back to it if you need to look at it, because this kind of helps set up. This is the foundation that we build the usted commands on. All right, so let's go ahead and walk through the steps of how to form usted commands. And really, you're going to see that it's actually pretty easy to form usted commands. There's just 3 steps that you need to know. So the first step is put the verb in the yo form of the present tense. So like I said, commands are kind of built on the present tense. You have to go back to the present tense, to the yo form of the present tense, and that's where you start. And then from there, you change the verb to be a command. Right, so first step, put the verb in the yo form in the present tense. Second step, remove the O from the ending. So you just take off the O off the ending. And then the third step is you add the opposite ending, all right? And I'll show you what that means, okay? So real quick here, hablar, let's go ahead. What are our endings? What do our endings usually end in? Remember, they usually end in A, right? Comer and escribir, on the other hand, their endings usually begin with an E, right? They usually have an E in their ending. All right. Well, for our steps, let's go ahead. So for hablar, the first step, which I've got right here, first step, we go to the yo form of the present tense. So it's hablo. The second step is that we take off the O. Okay, so we go ahead and get rid of the O off the end, and we just end up with HABL. And then the third step there is we add the opposite ending, okay? Now, what I mean by opposite ending, I'm gonna draw a line here, okay? Since AR verbs usually get an A, instead, they're gonna get an E, okay? So that's why we put hable on the end, all right? So then if we take the verb comer, we go to the first step, we go to the yo form of the present tense, we end up with como. Second step, we get rid of the O, we just end up with com. Third step, we add the opposite ending. Now, what I mean by the opposite ending is, remember, usually we put an E on the end of our verb comer, but instead we're going to add an A, all right? So the opposite of what we would usually do. So we end up with coma. Escribir, we go to the yo form of the present tense. We end up with escribo. We get rid of the O for our second step. And then the third step is we add our opposite ending A, because remember, we usually put an E on the end, but instead we're going to do the opposite and we're going to put an A on the end. So we end up with escriba. All right. Now, these are regular verbs, right? We go to the yo form in the present tense and we do these steps. Keep in mind that there are some other verbs like poner. Okay, we're going to do the same steps, but it's going to look a little bit different. The first step is go to the yo form of the present tense. Well, remember, poner in the yo form of the present tense is a go verb. So it's pongo. All right, so we're going to write that out for our first step. Our second step is to drop the O. Okay, so we get rid of the O. And then our third step is add the opposite ending. Okay, so since it was an ER verb and we would usually add E onto the end, instead of adding the E, we're going to add the A. So we end up with ponga, all right? So this last column here, this is our final product. These are commands. Okay, so I could say hable to you, and that would be talk or speak. Coma, eat. Escriba, write, you, write. Ponga, put, if I want you to put your backpack on the floor. Ponga su mochila en el piso, all right? So this is how we form our command with just these 3 easy steps. All right, so like you saw in the last slide, you cannot forget about your go verbs, right? When we go to the yo form of the present tense, we're going to find these go verbs and we don't want to forget about them, all right? So you've got the list here. You can see decir becomes digo, caer becomes caigo, and so on. You should already know these, but if you've forgotten them, then you're gonna need to write them down and practice them and memorize them so that when you see, something like salir, you'll remember, oh yeah, in the yo form of the present tense, salir is salgo, all right? And then just like I showed you with poner, we can change it into any of these into a command just simply by following our 3 steps. So for example, with decir up here, we do step 1, which is go to the yo form of the present tense, which is digo. Step 2, we get rid of our o. Step 3, we add the opposite ending. Since it was an IR verb, decir is an IR verb, so it would usually end in an E. We add an A instead. So diga, dígame, tell me. That's a command. Tener over here, if we do our 3 steps, so the first step is go to the yo form of the present tense. We have tengo. Second step, we get rid of the O. Third step, we add the opposite ending. Since tener ends in ER, we add an A to the end. So tenga. Tenga would be a command, have. Like I could say, tenga un buen día, have a good day. While we're talking about commands, it's important to know how to form affirmative and negative commands in Spanish. So we'll use affirmative commands when we want to tell someone to do something. And as you can see, we can just use the verb in English or Spanish. We can say run or corra. And then for a negative command, if we want to tell someone not to do something, in English, we just add a don't before it. So we say don't run. And in Spanish, it's really easy. All we have to do is add a no in front of the verb. So no corra. No corra then would be don't run. And so it's really easy to have affirmative and negative commands in Spanish. All right, so on this last slide here, I just want to go through some ejemplos with you and walk you through the 3 steps that you need to use in order to change verbs into commands. All right, so the first one here, no hacer su tarea en clase. Now, first I want to point out that your subject for all of these is the implied you. Okay, so remember in English class, you used to have to put you and then put parentheses around it to show that that was your subject, and then you underlined it 1 time, right? You remember this, right? Great memories of your childhood. So really that's all that's happening here as well. Every single one of these sentences is an implied usted. We know who the subject is. You do this, you don't do that. So here in the first one, we're saying you don't do your homework in class. So we need to change hacer to match usted, and we're going to go through our 3 steps. So the first step is to find the yo form of hacer in the present tense, which is hago, right? Yo hago would be how it would be. We're going to get rid of the o, and then we're going to add our opposite ending, which is a. So we end up with haga. The second sentence, comer su comida en la mesa. So eat your food at the table. Maybe you have that rule at your house or used to have that rule at your house. So first step, we take comer to the yo form of the present tense como. We get rid of the o, and then we add our opposite ending. Since it was an ER verb, we add an a. So coma su comida en la mesa. Eat your food, you eat your food at the table. Number 3, comprar los tacos para su amigo. This is a great command. I love this command. So we take comprar and we put it in the yo form of the present tense. So compro, we get rid of the o. Since it was an AR verb, we need to add an e on to the end. So it ends up as compre. Sorry, that did not work out like I thought it was going to. There we go. So, compré los tacos para su amigo. So, buy the tacos for your friend. Again, a great command. Number 4, no escribir una nota en su libro. So don't write a note in your book, right? So escribir, first step, go to the yo form of the present tense, escribo. We get rid of the O. Since it was an IR verb, we're going to add an A there. So it ends up as no escriba. No escriba una nota en su libro. Don't you write a note in your book, all right? And, you look at that and you say, well, when you hear no escriba, why couldn't we just say no escribe? Why couldn't we have just used the usted form of the verb in the present tense? Well, your ear wouldn't catch that there was a difference, right? When we give someone a command, we want them to know that we're giving them a command. And so by changing the ending, then that signals to their brain, oh, I should listen to this. This is the command that I'm being given. This isn't just a statement that's being made. That's all we're going to cover in this lesson. So I'll see you in class. Adios.